I've been testing this oil for the last 75,000 miles, and I'm taking my third oil sample today. We're going to be looking at what the oil analysis looks like, what the wear metals were like, how this oil performed in a 5.9 Cummins engine. So without further ado, let's get into it. Oil of the day is Chevron Delo. I had this on the shelf. It needs to go in one of the trucks, so I'm just going to put it in this truck. This is still pretty good oil. It's a synthetic blend. I got this on rollback at Walmart for $13 a gallon. Really can't beat it. You just cannot beat that price. Shell T5, it's 17, 18 bucks, and Schaeffers is now over 30 bucks a gallon, quite a premium in comparison to this. I could literally change my oil twice as often on this stuff as with Schaeffers, but I don't think it's on the level as Schaeffers for severe duty. Here goes our oil. I let it drain out for a few seconds, and then we'll get our sample. Well, fast forward about 3 weeks later, and here's our hard copy of the new data on the left. We also have our old datas on the right. You're welcome to pause the video and look at the hard copy if you want, but I'm going to take this over to a screen recording and show you an Excel spreadsheet where I break this data down and analyze it. I'm just looking real quick at the technical data for Schaeffers oil that we're looking at. It is the 15W40 CK4 synthetic blend. They say all kinds of stuff in here like, the oil is compatible with the modern emissions systems and so forth, like CK4 oils are, and all this other stuff about piston wear and rings and things that pretty much every oil company claims about their oils. But if you come down here, we've got a couple comments about the additives, the micron moly, penetro. Talks about the plating of the engine from the moly. The moly really sticks to the inside of the engine. And it also alludes to that the longer you run it, the better the effect is. Now, if you come down here, the real highlight that I wanted to show was this total base number. They list it here, what the oil comes with, and it's 10.2. So make mental note of that. That is our starting point, total base number. Higher is better. And typical base number would be between 6 and 12. All right, here we are on the spreadsheet side of things. And as a rundown, if I didn't say this at the beginning of the video, I've been running this oil uninterrupted for 75,000 miles. And I've taken 3 samples at different times. So my first sample you can see here was taken at 345,000 miles. It was on a 5.9 Cummins engine, and we had 11,000 miles on the oil. That stays consistent across the board. Took another sample in the middle of the test at around 380K, and the latest sample at 411,000 miles. The type of driving that was done during these 3 varies slightly. The first 2 are the same. The truck did mostly unloaded highway miles, about 95% highway, and it was able to accumulate these 11,000 miles in a mere 3 months. In the last case here, the truck did more city driving, about 10 to 15% city, almost double to triple the city driving, and it took 11 months to accumulate 11,000 miles. Would the extra time that the oil spent in the engine or the more city driving affect it? Well, looking at the numbers, it didn't really have any effect, which is nice. I mean, it's good to know. Considering that during this final interval, the engine had at least 10, 20% more hours on the oil than the first 2. Towing wise, there was a little bit of towing done in these first 2. Probably actually just this first one. But just maybe 100 miles, couple 100 miles here. There might have been 50 miles out of the 11,000 on that one. This is not my tow rig truck. If you're familiar with the channel, I have a 6.7 Cummins that I like to tow with. This one, I don't think we did any towing miles besides jockeying the trailer around in the driveway. I did hook it up a couple times, but it never was on the open road towing. So let's get down into the wear metals and so forth. So aluminum, your pistons are made of aluminum. We saw 4 parts per million, another 4 again, 3 again on the latest analysis. The average, so off to the right here, you'll see the averages for what you'd expect in 11,000 miles on the average truck with the average oil. And we're expecting 5. So we perform better than average. In fact, considerably better than average. You know, it only looks like, oh, we only got 2 parts per million better, but that is like 40% better here on this latest test. So percentage wise, that's a good look to see a just 3 and 4 better than average. Chromium, you would expect to see a couple parts per million in there. Piston rings are made of chromium. Nothing. We never detected chromium in any of our tests with Schaeffers. Iron. This is the most impressive one on here, I think. In 11,000 miles, you average 40 parts per million iron. And we got 4, 5, and 5, meaning we're seeing 8 times less iron in our oil than we would expect. So it's iron block, cylinder walls are iron. So it's indicating cylinder wear, and we're not seeing much cylinder wear. Could it be that it's just a really good engine? I think it is a good engine, but the oil has a lot to do with it too. And, you know, if you would tell me it's going to take you 800,000 miles changing Schaeffer oil every 11K to accumulate as much cylinder wear as the average truck is doing in 100,000, I'd be like, well, that's staggeringly good. This is one of my favorite things, and doing three different analyses at different times has allowed me to, you know, just validate that first one wasn't just a fluke. Copper wear is much lower than average. 212, average is 7. Lead is an interesting one. Bearing material could be made of lead. And there's been a few comments online about Schaeffers oil. Particularly one comment I read was a person who ran Schaeffers and AMSOIL. And they said that they were very happy with the Schaeffer result on their analysis, but detected multiple times the presence of lead when running Schaeffers, while not detecting lead while running AMSOIL. And so when I saw a little bit of lead show up in my second analysis, I thought maybe I would be the next person that would experience that. But in our third test, we did not pick up lead. And the average is 3. So even in the second test, Schaeffers is performing better than average on the lead wear. Finally, we have tin. I'm not sure what materials in the engine are made of tin. We did pick up a trace amount of it in our last interval, but that's it, still below average. So we were below average to some extent in every category in the wear metals. And in some categories, we were extremely below average. Let's look at these elements like potassium, silicon, sodium. These are things you might see if coolant was getting in the oil, or you had a blown head gasket, or something else is wrong with the engine. And we didn't see much in any of these categories at all. Potassium was consistent across the board, 676, average is 10. Silicon, we go 322, so we trended slightly in the right direction, still well below average, less than half of the average. Sodium was a more clear trend, 765, average is 8. So we're trending in the right direction with sodium. I don't think there's a whole lot to note here. This is just more or less showing that we have a healthy engine. Anti-wear additives. Moly. So moly is one of the specialties of Schaeffers. Not every oil uses moly. Some do, some don't. It's an anti-wear additive. It really sticks to the inside of the engine. I mentioned about it plating the engine, and the longer you run it, the more effective it is. And what I was hoping would happen with this was that we would see a trend. That we started here with 73, went to 89. I was hoping to see in the 90s somewhere. Because what I was going to say is when you first start running the oil, that moly's sticking to the engine. So when you extract the oil to send it to the lab, the first time you do it, you're not going to get as much moly out as you would in the future. What I think happened here is after a couple of oil changes, we did the change at 345, but there was a couple changes. There was one in the 350s and one in the 360s. There's probably a third one in the 370s before we actually got to this one. So all that time, there's probably more moly coming out with each change. And then we hit 89 and then it kind of plateaued. That's what I'm thinking with that. The average oil contains 35 parts per million moly, so we are over double the average. But that's one of the things that Schaeffers likes to do is put moly in there. Boron is one that kind of goes hand in hand with moly as anti-wear. Schaeffers has a decent supply of boron, relatively consistent results here in the high 60s and low 70s. The average is close to 90. Phosphorus and zinc, so that's your traditional anti-wear additives. In modern oils, you can only have so much phosphorus and zinc because it can damage the DPF and other catalysts. So that's what happens with especially with the CK4 oils to make them compatible with the emissions. So they do find other ways to have anti-wear like moly and boron, and there's others. They might even be using antimony now as one. And so phosphorus and zinc, there's still a nice supply of phosphorus and zinc detected in all of these oils. Around 1100-ish for phosphorus, right about average, maybe slightly above average in these last two here. Zinc, we're seeing 1100 to 1300s here. So I would say slightly above average in both phosphorus and zinc. Detergents wise, Schaeffers is heavy on calcium as opposed to magnesium. We did detect a significant chunk of magnesium compared to the other two, although I've seen other brands of oil have in the hundreds for magnesium. Schaeffers is definitely heavy on the calcium. You can see even the average oil is going to have in the 400s for magnesium. Calcium, expect around 2,000 as your average. Schaeffers is 2,200 to 2,500, somewhere in that range. A quick look at viscosity, very, very normal here. 15W40 oil. This is at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is like your truck working hard temperature. And you would expect to see somewhere between high 12s and mid 15s, and we're looking at 14s typically here, for 14 and be your average. Not bad at all. No fuel, no antifreeze, no water detected in our samples. Insolubles was at just 0.1, which is great. Means your oil filter is doing a good job. What else do we have here? This was just really impressive results across the board with this oil. I would buy this oil again. I'd like to order myself another case. I've actually got 6 gallons of it sitting over here that I'm going to put one of them in the 5.9 and one change in the 6.7 yet, but I'd like to get me some more. I don't see why I wouldn't, besides the expense. It is a little costly. One comment from the lab. The lab states that they're very impressed. The total base number, completely forgot. Total base number on the final test here. So after 11,000 miles, so also remember, we started at 10.2. You want to see at least one left, at least one. Some fleets, I was reading an article, says fleet fleets like to look for 1/3 of the original total base number. So we would want to see more than 3 before they change their oil. Here's our result. We had 5.3. So lost about half. Now, the thing about total base number is you lose most of it out of the gate. First 1,000 miles, you've plunged in total base number compared to what you're going to do over the course of the next however many 1,000 miles. So at 5.3, I mean, we could possibly see 20,000 miles or so before we really would want to change the oil from a total base number perspective. The lab, okay, so the lab says they think I can go much further on my oil than 11,000 miles. They told me on my sheet that based on these results, 13,000 miles should be fine to try next if I want. So very impressed. That's the verdict with this oil on the 5.9. I will follow up with you on the 6.7 too when I change the oil in that truck, probably sometime in the spring. I'm doing just a 8,000 mile test with the 6.7 with the same oil in it to see if we can see as good of results in a different engine as what we saw here in this engine. And I'm just doing one analysis. I'm not going to try and go 75K miles again over there, but that's going to be interesting to see if it lines up between two different engines too. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.